Thank you, and as an old denizen of the Senate, I'm very used to timetables being upended by votes and members' schedules, so I'm very happy to accommodate that. And it's great to be back here from my new perch now across the street. I have a lot more engagement with the Congress from the Heritage Foundation, and I think certainly given the changes we're about to witness, it's an exciting place to be for the next couple of years. What I wanted to, keep my watch in front of me because I do want to have time for questions, is raise an issue that is, I think, central in all of our minds after the invasion of Ukraine, which is that energy is now more than a commodity. It has become a currency and a basic necessity, the production of which is now out of most people's control. To paraphrase the Blackadder, for those of you from the United Kingdom, I am one of those many people who are perfectly happy to use electricity, but I have no idea how it actually works. If you told me to go produce the electricity I need for an hour, I would be at a loss. So unlike, say, candles or firewood, things that you could produce domestically, you could sustain yourself in the past, that simply is no longer the case. And I think that is what then leads us to the conclusion that energy security is now national security, and that, as I said, has really come into high relief post-Ukraine. I wanted to tell you two quick stories about my experience with the Trump administration and then over the course of the last year that have brought this into even higher relief. And the first is from the summer of 2020, when I was stationed in Abu Dhabi as the Secretary of Energy's Special Representative for the Middle East and North Africa. I had previously been on the National Security Council staff, and so I knew that the talks for what would become the Abraham Accords were underway, and that a close colleague was actually coming through in a matter of weeks to see if we could get an actual deal. And I will never forget waking up in late July in Abu Dhabi, flipping on Bloomberg and seeing the news that Chevron, one of the U.S. Oil majors, had purchased Noble Energy. You are to be forgiven if you have not heard of Noble Energy. It is not a particularly large company, although it being based out of Houston, it's very close to my heart. But Noble is what is the U.S. company that is leading the exploration of the Israeli gas fields in the Eastern Mediterranean. And when the purchase price was comparatively small in this world, $4 billion. But when I saw that, I thought, we're going to get this done, because there is no way that Chevron would risk its Gulf contracts if it did not have ironclad assurances, not only from Abu Dhabi and Manama, but most importantly from Riyadh, that those energy contracts would not be endangered by the purchase of a company with major involvement in Israel. And for me, that was an extraordinary demonstration of how energy can play an enormously constructive role in international diplomacy, and that the United States can be a leader in this kind of diplomacy that leads to mutual prosperity and peace. And I'll return to the Eastern Med at the end of my remarks, but I thought that was an extremely positive development, obviously, that has had major ramifications for energy security. Then, in addition, I wanted to talk a little bit about Ukraine. In the weeks after the war, one of the most interesting men in Washington, would of course mean Senator Joe Manchin, referred to the invasion as what he considered to be the first energy war. I don't know that I consider it the first. I think certainly you can argue about energy's catalytic role in various previous conflicts, but it certainly is an invasion in which energy has played a central role. And we had a episode here in the Senate on January 15th of this year in which the President of the United States came to the Senate to urge members of his own party to vote against Nord Stream 2 sanctions on the grounds that Europe's energy, there was a logic to it. Europe's energy security depends on Nord Stream. The Germans very much wanted the sanctions to be lifted and the project to be completed. But I think that was the green light to Putin, that the United States was not going to seriously oppose an incursion into Ukraine, that the energy card he held was literally a trump card, no pun intended there, but that he could make this move and would not suffer catastrophic repercussions. So in my mind, that was the alter to the Chevron situation, where you have energy playing a very negative role, a very destructive role, and leading down the path of conflict and violence, which I know is something that we all oppose. Then, sort of basing off of these two episodes, one thing that it's been very much on my mind and is on our minds at the Heritage Foundation is how do we craft a responsible international energy security policy in which the United States' role now as one of the three great producers can be harnessed to our benefit and to the benefit of our partners and allies. And just a couple of quick points I wanted to make on that. First and foremost, we have to divorce our energy security and our climate policies from cooperation with China. We cannot give China a veto on whatever we want to do on energy or climate, because they simply are not a good faith partner. And if you look at their activities, you look at their rhetoric, both from Glasgow and from Sharm, but then you look at what they're actually doing. Xi has learned to talk a good game on climate, and he says lofty things, and everybody aspires to cooperation. But where we would act in good faith, and we have been successfully reducing our emissions over the last 10 years, they have been increasing their emissions. And they've opened record numbers of coal plants. So while we would encourage them to come over to the light side and improve this behavior, we cannot shackle our policies to that. So that's going to take a major mindset change. And along those lines, we cannot outsource emissions. This notion that we can somehow become cleaner by importing oil from a country like Venezuela, which both harvests irresponsibly and throws off some of the dirtiest crude on the planet. Yes, we may say we need the supply because we're trying to reduce our production at home, but that doesn't make us cleaner. And the same goes for the importation of batteries, solar panels, various things produced by extremely dirty Chinese industry. We don't make ourselves cleaner by importing these products. And so those two fallacies are things I think we have to reject. Then finally, as I said, we have the United States now as one of the world's three great producers. Unfortunately, and I know this will shock you all to learn, there's something of a shell game going on here, both in Congress and in the administration, about U.S. domestic production. People talk a lot about leases and permits. That's where the game comes in. You're granted a lease, but not a permit. The lease expires. You can't produce. But even more chilling, and Carla and I are Pennsylvanians, so we know this with painful familiarity. You have a regulatory system which is systematically choking off infrastructure projects. We talk a lot about pipelines, everything from Keystone to Nord Stream and between, but there are other issues. There's the issue of if you can't build a pipeline, which is incredibly difficult to do these days, you try to get a workaround with, say, rail transport for something like natural gas. Well, on the first day of the current administration, they put in place regulations that make transport by rail incredibly difficult. So even if you can pump product, getting it to a refinery and then getting it to market is being choked off. And we have to stop that, because the key concept I'd like to leave you all with is that as a major producer, the United States can be a leader in a stable, plentiful global supply of increasingly the cleanest, the most efficient energy. And to do that, we have to ramp up at home, but then we also have to look at friendly sources around the world that can help supply allies who might be now rejecting supply from, first and foremost, Russia. And the two areas I'd invite you all to take a close look at are the Eastern Mediterranean. Remarkable discoveries continue to be made there. The only positive thing I've seen spontaneously come out of the Middle East in the last 10 years is the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, centered in Cairo, which is to promote the collective harvesting of those resources and then their export. And it was another kind of fruits of peace thing that you have Israel now exporting through the natural gas facilities at Alexandria. And also then we have tremendous opportunities in what we at Heritage are calling the middle corridor, coming up from sources like Azerbaijan, for example, which can come into Europe, offset, again, Russian imports, provide energy security for Europe, and in, as I said, an increasingly clean and efficient way. So I will kick the rest of my time back now for questions at the end and look forward to the comments of my colleagues.